What is up, everyone? This is Kevin Jones, builder and educator in crypto, and this is the Crypto Mastery Podcast, where we talk about the crypto industry and elevate your knowledge in the space. This podcast is brought to you by SpeedRunEthereum. Test your skills and learn how to build decentralized applications on Ethereum at SpeedRunEthereum.com. Today, I will be speaking with Chris Castig. Chris is co-founder of Console.xyz, a secure chat platform for Web3. Chris is also a professor at Columbia University Business School and has developed a handful of highly successful courses at General Assembly. So without further ado, let me welcome Chris to the podcast. Chris, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. That is an impressive bio, and I'm really, really excited for our conversation today. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for having me.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like where are you from? Where'd you grow up? Like how did you get into or what have you been doing in your life before Web3, and how did you get into technology?
Yeah, I grew up out in the shadow of New York City, a place called New Jersey, and I was always really into music. I wasn't really into technology growing up. I played music every day. I was in bands. I was a music major. The way I got into technology was file sharing, like BitTorrent and
Nice,
Napster.
yes. Yes.
Um,
Like us all, we all did that.
Yeah, maybe if anyone listening is a little younger, you may not remember those days. This is like I'd say 2000 to 2008 was probably the heyday of BitTorrent. I mean, BitTorrent's still around, but around that time, it was really revolutionary because for the first time ever, you could go on the internet and just like download, basically hear any song you wanted to hear. That wasn't possible before that time. You would always have to go to record store. It'd be like $17 or something to buy a CD, or you'd have one album, and all of a sudden you go from having like in my entire like life money at that time based on my allowance or whatever was like $17. I'd spend it on a CD, and then you'd have that album for the month. And now all of a sudden I could go online and I could have access to all the world's music. And I was just fascinated as a musician. Wow, how is it possible that I can share, because this is the way it worked, directly with another person, just me and another person, no intermediary, can share music. That's amazing. And so that caused me to really be curious about code, taught myself how to code. I got and then Bitcoin happened, and it was like kind of easy for me to understand that like Bitcoin was basically like BitTorrent for money. Like now it's like I could share money person to person.
Yeah.
And then I guess fast forward a few years after that, I had started a company. I was teaching people how to code. Web3 comes around, and I'm like, oh, this Web3 is just peer to peer. It's that for everything. It's BitTorrent for everything. For identity, for websites, for access, for sharing property, for art, and so I think that was that's more or less kind of been my last my journey over the past decade, getting to where I am today, building a Web3.
Yeah. So I actually used to work for Best Buy, and like so every Tuesday, right, all the new CDs would drop, and
Yeah.
I would just like go over there and like, oh, I need this and this. I buy all the CDs, and like half my paycheck was gone just back to the place that I worked. So I can respect when BitTorrent came out, it was like, oh, all right, I'm just gonna buy blank CDs now. You spend
Yeah.
that money invested in the CD burner, right? So but yeah,
Yes.
no, that's great. I really like that story, right? Like the idea that like, oh, like BitTorrent started out, it was the decentralized file sharing, and then Bitcoin came out, it's decentralized money, and now we're at like this new kind of realm of like blockchain like applications, and it's decentralized data, it's decentralized everything, right? So I really like that approach and that story. That's cool. And so like how did you kind of like dip your feet into Web3? Like I guess, well, like what was the motivating factor for you to get into like crypto and Web3? And like, what was that kind of journey like for you?
I heard about Bitcoin for the first time in 2013 because I was living in Silicon Valley, I guess that's what you call it. When you're there, it just kind of feels like the suburbs of San
Yeah,
Francisco.
it's true. It's very true.
There's like a Trader Joe's and like a 24-hour fitness, there's traffic, and it's just like, not so sexy, but Silicon Valley. And the one thing that is kind of sexy though about being there for the first time was it did feel like the future. Like it was like all of a sudden I kind of arrived like a few years later in the future, and people were in 2013 buying things and paying with Bitcoin, mostly just with each other, mostly drugs.
Yes, this is very true.
But that was 2013. But I'd never heard of this like internet money, was basically what they were calling it back then. And but it really, like I said, it really based on my background. I really was just so curious about like what that could mean. So as an academic, I had studied, my master's in distributed network culture. So basically peer-to-peer culture, like how it affects society. I was just so interested. And at the same time, the reason I was in Silicon Valley at the time is I was starting an education company. So around that time, I didn't have the time or, I was really focused on my Web2 company. So all that to say, the way I've been involved in Web3 for about since 2016 is through education. I taught a blockchain and a Bitcoin course around 2016 online. And then I started bringing that to Columbia University Business School. So in 2017, that's when I started introducing what we just call blockchain, now it's Web3 to the curriculum. Actually, I had Joe Lubin come speak in 2017, the day the CryptoKitty NFT came out. It was pretty cool. I don't think anybody knew what was happening at the time. In retrospect, it's like, that's the beginning of NFTs. At the time, we were just like, I don't know, it was like millions of dollars of digital cats being sold.
Yeah.
It was confusing.
Rare digital cats. No,
they're very rare. It was exciting. And so it took me I left my Web2 company about 2 years ago now, and so that's how I got to Console. And I thought it was just like a really important problem to be solving as far as the future of decentralized social media and chat. And it was just something I was just so excited to dive in and build around.
Yeah. I also had a similar journey. I started getting involved in Bitcoin, right, and saw Bitcoin as kind of like this solution for the world's problems with money and stuff like that. And then I just kind of wanted more, right, from the whole concept of like decentralization. And so that's interesting. Tell me a little bit more about the education startup. I'm kind of curious about that, just because I'm an educator and I try to teach, online, and also I just I'm a lead mentor for Solidity Track at Growit.com, and I try to do YouTube videos. So like, how was that experience of like starting that?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, Kevin, that's so cool. That's something I'm just super passionate about. Is just like, I don't know. I think the first time I taught English in Japan right out of college, because I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And it was just such a magical thing over a year to spend time with someone and to just watch them grow, and then to be, they're grateful because you help them lead them somewhere. So I think just having that experience, I was like, wow, this is so great. And but I didn't want to teach English my whole life. And so around 2010, 2011, I think that's when coding boot camps started to become sort of a thing. Before that, most people just taught themselves how to code. Like, I just broke things on the internet and then tried to fix them. Like literally, I'd just spend like till 5 a.m. I'd just be like trying to fix code. I had no idea what I was doing. So there was just like a real need for coding lessons on YouTube, on Udemy. Skillshare was in Udemy. We were pretty new at the time. And so, the way I had always learned, taught myself how to code, was that like, to have a small project you can do in less than 30 days. Like, I didn't know I was doing that, but a friend of mine, Natan Griffel, he had a similar kind of approach to life. And I've watched, I'm just like in awe of his skills. Like, I feel like he could like every month become like pretty good at like a new thing, whether it's like chess or doing backflips or something, or learning to code. Yeah. And so we were like, wow, we feel like this could be like a framework or a way of learning. Like every month you do something new. And so we started a company called OneMonth.com. And it was a place where you could come and in 30 days, learn an amazing skill, mostly around coding and business. And that's how we started. We applied to Y Combinator and we got into YC, which was like, I think just like an eye-opening moment to help grow the business and help us kind of upskill our own knowledge about what we needed to do. And yeah, we spent about 7 years running that. Still exists today, and it was a great journey.
That's awesome. And you're a professor at Columbia University Business School as well. Like what did you do there, or what do you do there? Is that kind of something you do just
Yeah,
on the side, or?
yeah, it's on the side. It's an adjunct, so I just teach one course every
Awesome.
semester. It's called digital literacy. So it's
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right. So I think this is a good segue to like kind of talk about like Console.xyz. I don't know, for some from viewers probably watching, they're like sick of the billion Discord channels that they have, and maybe using things like Slack and the million Telegram different windows that you have open. So like, tell us a little bit about Console.xyz. Like, what is it, and kind of like what was some of the motivation in building it?
Console is a secure group chat app. We're working to make the best community chat app that exists on the internet, and we are really excited about that path ahead of us. We're building it on Web3 principles, although I wouldn't say that the Web3 principles are itself enough of a motivator for why you should come to Console. I feel like in 10 years from now, the most successful companies will be built on Web3 principles. Kind of like today, websites are built on like, I don't know, whether it's like, I don't know, a mean stack or lamp stack or like Nginx, right, or whatever. It just is going to become like the baseline of the framework. And that is just like a belief that we have about the future. So right now, we think it's really revolutionary to have Web3 principled experience, because what that means for us is chat that's decentralized, meaning you could run your own server, chat that is private, meaning we're going to have signal level end-to-end encryption. We're integrating that into the console. Right now we're in beta, so we have a few communities using the site, and we'll be rolling those two out by March of the new year. And everything else that I think you love about Web3, those will be the baseline. And then the last thing I'll add is, what does it mean to be, the best group chat app? We are just really, really curious and interested in innovating where chat is right now. For the longest time, chat just seems like it's just like one stream of chat, that just kind of pours down the screen, top to bottom. Sometimes you have thousands of people in one group chatting, and it's noisy, and it's often filled with spam and scams, and people, even just this weekend, every week, any weekend that someone listens to this, I can guarantee you that this past weekend, somebody lost some NFTs on Discord. It just happened to be Bored Apes this past weekend. But yeah, and I think that these are all things that we could do for communities to make communities more safe, to make them more productive and creative. And we think Web3 tools can get us there. So that's what we're excited about.
Yeah. One of these concepts I kind of hear is like, it kind of goes back to the whole like proof of work kind of mentality when it came to like anti-spam. There was an entire protocol built on this concept of like proof of work. And so I think like, I wonder like how, like proof of stake plays a part in like spam protection and security in a decentralized kind of protocol for chatting. Right. Is that kind of like one of the approaches that you feel like you're having with the product, where it'll kind of be like an incentivized tool, like, and that's how you'll protect from spam and protect from bots? Or
yeah, so yeah, kind of building on that. Yes, and building on that, one of the ways that we can, really, I would say, eliminate 80% of the bots is by adding friction, right? Is one way we think about it. And right now, there's very little friction on Discord or on Telegram when you're creating new accounts. So if you want to create a new account, all you need is just an email address, right? And you could just have a bot. I mean, I could write a script and just make 1,000 Discord accounts right now. It's super easy. Yeah. With what you're talking about, building on proof of stake, building proof of work, basically building on like blockchain. If identity is on the blockchain, right? In order to make that identity, it costs a little bit of gas, right? It costs a little bit of money. And let me give a specific example, right? So when you come to Console right now, right, we have a community at Console HQ for early adopters of Console. And when you come, we have verification where you use your .eth, so your ENS name. So we have an integration
Awesome.
with ETH, with ENS. And what that means is anyone who's in this chat room has had to purchase a domain for it's $5 a year, right, for ENS, and you've been verified to come into the site. So why is that important? Well, that's friction, right? The ability to have a room that we as the community admin can say, hey, you have to spend $5 is going to reduce, that's that like 80% of spam. I don't say 100% because if you look at research, like you can never get rid of 100%. But if you could get rid of like the long tail of a lot of the annoying spam, I think you can make a big difference in improving the trust that exists when you remove all of that. And so that would be one example of how we're using the blockchain and ENS names for that kind of friction.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I really like this idea. I'm a huge fan of ENS, and so I think that's a really good like kind of like first step of just kind of like gating it, right? That's cool. So I kind of feel like some of the motivation around it was just around the whole concept of Web3 and believing in kind of like the future and the story that is going to come with building these Web3 applications. So I think that kind of is some of the problems it solves. It aims to be more secure. Aims to be a more decentralized platform. How does it work in terms of like data? Like I know we talk about like decentralized data, right, on the blockchain, and like how is Console.xyz kind of approaching the actual data? Like if someone wants to kind of know that their data isn't going to be reused or it's going to be able to be taken with them, is there any kind of concepts that you guys have around that?
Yeah, so there's different types of data that we share when we use a community or a chat app, right? One of the types of data we give are the authentication of who we are. So that's our username, our password, and that unlocks access to all of the data, right? The second type of data is the type of data, the content, like the chat data that you share with the community. So right now, the way that every chat app out there works is that both of those, for the most part, both of those are on a server that the company owns, right? Which makes sense for the most part, right? You log into Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Telegram, it doesn't matter. Your username and your password are stored in a database that company owns. And because that company owns it, they have control over potentially what to do with it. A lot of these have been hypothetical situations that I've been like forecasting based on what I would just say is like history of people abusing data, because there are so many use cases. And then it's kind of wild and an amazing catalyst this weekend or this past few weeks with the way that Elon Musk is treating data at Twitter, as far as banning certain accounts, as far as, basically changing the algorithm and who gets seen, who doesn't get seen, all of this kind of stuff. So whether he's doing a good job or not, put that aside. The lesson there, that whether you like him or not, doesn't matter, is that these platforms that we're creating, sometimes we trust the founder, but we don't think about long-term view of like what happens when that founder leaves. And when Jack, in this case, the founder of Twitter, leaves, now we have the situation where a new person comes in and they're going to have new ways, and they have access to that data because there is that central repository. And this is an issue for web apps as well as for like even for nations and governments, as we're seeing a new person can come to China or America, get into power, and then completely rewrite how the data is stored, treated, right? And so centralized data historically can be dangerous from a privacy standpoint, but then also from an ownership, because then you don't really own that data. So back to your question with the two types of data, for at Console, we're doing something revolutionary that hasn't been done yet, which is the identity, which I mentioned, like ENS, your blockchain, your wallet address. is stored cryptographically in a web wallet or on the blockchain, but not with us. We don't have that. And then number two, the information that you're sharing, we're offering for communities the ability, if they choose, to run their own server in the middle so that they can host it themselves. It's going to be encrypted data anyway. They won't be able to read it, but you don't have to worry that we have no fingerprint on us if you don't want. And so this is something that we're working toward over the next year. We're kind of progressively getting toward that goal point. But to me, that's building in Web3, and I haven't seen that yet with any other chat app that exists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you guys accomplish that, I think it's a huge privacy win, right? And I think like privacy is very important. Obviously, with like everything that happened with Tornado Cash and like this, these new platforms that are being built need to be done in a private way. So that's really cool. Great. So like at a high level, like what is the technology architecture? You mentioned Ethereum, you mentioned ENS. What kind of protocols are you building on, and what does it kind of like the overall architecture look like?
Console's multi-chain, so right now we support Ethereum, we support Stacks, which is an L2 for Bitcoin, and we have a lot of other Polygon, Solana. We have a lot of things kind of in the roadmap, but right now Ethereum and Stacks for the chain. But I guess for anyone listening, as an educator and as maybe someone looking to learn, I think it's kind of a misconception that we get a lot, like a kind of mythical question I get a lot is like, well, is everything on the blockchain or all the chats on the blockchain, this kind of thing. It doesn't really make sense to do that. The question we ask is like, I see the blockchain as basically as a shared database. It's like in some ways I call it like a forever database, because you could imagine that you put data on this database, whether it's your name, whether it's some code, and once it's on that database, it's there and you pretty much can't delete it. And it can be shared, right? And it's the cryptography of crypto, right? We always think of crypto as money, but crypto is cryptography that allows us to put things on the shared database and then have this like really magical experience where only people with the secret keys can access that data, but we can have the shared repository and then have really granular access. So that's, how we approach the blockchain. And it's really identity for us is the number one thing that we're using the blockchain for. Because if you come to Console, like our long-term vision is we want to be able to provide a project, a platform that if we, the founders, disappeared, if the project disappeared, that you could run the project without us, that you could have access to your data without us. That's real decentralization. That basically my house, an airplane can fall on my house when I'm sleeping, but that the site should still be able to outlive me is really the goal. And so for us, identity on the blockchain, and then slowly bringing social graphs on the blockchain. We're looking at Lens, Farcaster, integrations, ENS we already have, to help so that we don't have to own that. That's number one. Everything else, though, right now is pretty Web 2 tech stack, as in we're using Python, we're just using a SQL database, we're using AWS at the moment, and as the technologies get better to help us move away from that, things like IPFS and Filecoin and different things Protocol Labs are working on, we're talking pretty closely to them. We'll be able to progressively decentralize away. But to us, identity and data and ownership of the chat data is really the most important. And that we'll be able to achieve progressively over the next few months. So that's the most important part.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah, I think the first step at like identity and privacy and like, I always preach, I work full time for a Web 2 company, right? I work for Nginx, which is like I would say it's probably the most centralized application on the internet, right? There's over 400 million websites running on Nginx, and there's still a lot of the internet that needs to run on centralized services, and I don't think it makes sense for everything to be decentralized yet. Like you said, until the technology catches up, we don't really have a long-term goal. Or actually, we have a long-term goal, but we don't have a long-term plan at the moment to be able to store lots of data. Right? It's just not feasible.
Yeah,
Right?
I would be
Even on
curious.
IPFS.
Are you at Nginx? Are you thinking about how decentralization might be a service or product that is offered in the future?
Yeah, I think eventually, but it's definitely on our
Too early.
it's in our vision. Like, as far as like internally in the office of the CTO, we are looking at blockchain. We're looking at ways. A lot of it, well, pretty much everything that we do is pretty much centralized. But there's definitely some ways that we can integrate with blockchain. And so part of what I've been doing is trying to figure out like avenues of what that might look like. We're definitely used by pretty much every blockchain application out there. They use Nginx for something, at least some of the large like service providers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely on the vision. I see like a future maybe we have some kind of like decentralized version of Nginx, right, where you can run some kind of operations locally or something. I don't know. That would be cool if we got to that. But yeah, cool. So this conversation reminded me, as you mentioned a little bit about like the protocol being able to kind of like live on forever if it needed to by the community. And I think like one of those things that I noticed looking at Console.xyz is that you guys have like kind of an open source mentality on the project. Me working for Nginx, which is probably one of the most popular open source tools, that really excites me, and I'm really passionate about open source. So like, how has that open source kind of concept been really important when creating Console?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, that is really important to us. And I'm going to answer this question just as real time as possible, because this is something we're debating internally, and maybe you have some input on it as well. And we're looking to the Console community to help with these decisions about, when do we open source the project, and how much rights do we give to people who can run the project, right? Those are some of the questions we're working with right now. And so I've used open source, I've contributed open source, but I've never launched, I've launched small open source projects. But to me, this on this kind of massive scale is, there's a lot of considerations, both legally and then technically, I think, how to help people run the code. So right now, we haven't shared the code yet. We are working just in our own repo on GitHub.
Mhm.
And the goal as of right now is within probably halfway through 2023 to share that. And I think some of the reasons why we're waiting is because we're going through this big integration to get the Signal protocol, which is like the best privacy protocol on the internet, integrated. And we want to get there, and we want to get out of our beta phase. We were thinking like, let's at least get through that. It will just help us focus more on the product, and like maybe not so much like all the PR requests we're going to start to get and all. So that's one argument. But on the other side, I think there is the argument of like, let's just open source it and just have people start contributing. And like, the more we open source it, the better people will catch bugs sooner is the idea. The more we'll learn about potentially product market fit, what people like. I'd say these are the two avenues. But I think that the big question for us is like what the rights are that people should retain when building, if using Console. On one end of the spectrum, we could basically just share the code, which is like anyone can look at the code. And I think that gives us transparency into the project. You can trust us, right? This is a level of trust that you don't get with Facebook or WhatsApp, because you don't know, if you can't see the code, if no one's looked at the code in a public way, you don't know if Facebook is like siphoning some of that data to the NSA. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's literally what has happened in 2013 with the Snowden revelations. There's documentation of this. I can point you to it. So we don't know that. That still isn't happening. And if it's open source, it gives transparency. So on one end, transparency is a huge win for open source. I'd say all the way on the other end of open source is like allowing the community to add code, be committed the code to it, run their own version. I think we'll probably fall somewhere in between at the moment, just because we do want to focus on having a central source and bringing people in. But I think longer term, potentially allowing people to, like I was saying before, run their own version and spin it up without us is really the goal. So those are all the questions we're asking. Sorry, it's a bit of a vague answer, but we're like in
No,
real
it's
time.
okay.
So anything, if you have anything to that, I'd love to know your opinion on what you would like to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, well, I think you hit it pretty much the nail on the head when you said that, like, oh, there's different kind of levels of open source. Nginx is a great example of that. We have a large number of open source code that's available on our GitHub. A lot of it is read only, right? It's really hard for something as popular as Nginx to field the level of interest when it comes to like source code contributions. Most of the code contributions that we take are from some of the large kind of service providers that are kind of like known developers that have been kind of contributing to Nginx over the years. So I think the first like kind of level is like, okay, like transparency. It's kind of like when you deploy a smart contract on Ethereum, the first thing you should do is verify it, right? Because you want to kind of instill some trust in people that are calling that smart contract, right? So I think the same goes for like an open source project. Is you get it out there, you get the source code available for people to read. I think the second step is like proper licensing, making sure that the licensing is strategized with your business model, and making sure that you're not going to like cannibalize it by open sourcing it. I mean, you need to be able to make the project survive. And so I think there's some level of like thinking that should go into that for sure. Open Nginx is FreeBSD clause 2, which basically allows anyone to take the product and fork it and manipulate it and kind of resell it. So there's definitely some issues when you have something like that where you have a license that's a little too open. So but me personally, I think that that first step that you're going to take is with transparency is most important, because it falls in line with like Web3, right? Like this open idea of openness and transparency, right? And if you can
yeah. Oh, sorry. This is fascinating. What is Nginx's direct business model? Because if they have the free BDS license where I can just basically take Nginx's code and start my own Nginx 2 company, right? You're saying? So like, what is your moat, like your business moat? Like, how do you protect your business if anyone can just compete with you with your own code?
Yeah, so I mean, open source is actually one of our probably biggest competitions, right? Because it's available anywhere and anyone can take it and fork it and just run it, and they don't need to pay for it, right? We have a paid version of Nginx, so we have like a commercial version called Nginx Plus, which is like kind of it's the same reason that anyone else can take Nginx and fork it and make money. It's the same reason we can. We fork it, we have modified it, added patches onto it, and then we resell it as a product.
Is Nginx
we do also
Plus open source, or is that not open
Nginx
source?
Plus is not open source. So like we have a premium kind of model. Yeah. And we also have some like SaaS products, and we have some like management suite and stuff like that. We also have another open source project called Nginx Unit, which is quite interesting. You might want to check out, which is a open source application server that allows you to run like Python, PHP, Go, Perl, Ruby, all this stuff inside of a virtualized container inside of the platform, which that was kind of like one of the things that was lacking with Nginx. But yeah, so I think the way that like I said, the way that we approach open source is like we want to make that available because it's always been the core of Nginx is to have an open source product. We do field open source requests, and it's usually like high level protocol stuff. So like HTTP3, quick, maybe it's like Linux level kind of enhancements that are coming from like service providers. We're thinking long-term strategy is we're going to start open sourcing and taking more and more features and functionality in the coming years. And that's just because I think we can grow the product a little faster if we open a little bit more to the community. But I think right now it's not really probably fully open source in that sense. So
That's such a great lesson to learn. I love this conversation because I want to have more conversations. I think open source is such a public good and so important for society. And
Yeah.
I feel like it's not discussed enough. So actually, I'm learning a lot. So thanks for sharing that, Kevin.
Yeah, no worries. This has been great so far. Yeah. Cool. So, all right, let's kind of keep moving on here. I also see, we already talked about it a little bit, but like one of your core primary principles is like secure by design. Um, so you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but like, tell us a little bit more about Signal and tell us a little bit more about the security focus of Console and kind of why you decided that security was so important.
Yeah, security is important. Everybody wants security, right? I think the questions become what are the trade-offs often as a user, like how much do users really care? People will say it, but how much do they really care? When we're dealing with what I think is Web3 of this world where two things change in the next 10 years. We have our own keys to our identity, which means that more than ever, we're in charge of our own security. So if anyone listening is new to that, you can download for free MetaMask wallet. You can use that wallet. And when you do that, you get a password that only you have, that's not stored anywhere else. It's only given to you and allows you access to that data. Because of that, you have this new freedom, but you also have this new responsibility of having to protect those keys, of having to make sure that you're signing when you're clicking around MetaMask and not doing something, not getting phished and all this kind of stuff. So more than ever, with this new freedom will come new responsibility. And more than ever, people, I believe, will start to care more about not only security, but privacy. And I can give a handful of examples. We're already starting to see this like wave of this. There's a lot of evidence of this over the past year of this is becoming more of an issue for people as they come to Web3. So we believe that people are going to care more about that, and we want to put a lot of effort. We're putting a lot of effort into building Console in a way that's secure by design. For us, what that means is one of the things I already mentioned. By us not having your cryptograph, like your private keys for your wallet, that's a huge win, because if somebody were to hack Console's database, all they're going to see is your publicly shared wallet key, right? Your wallet. And so they're not going to be able to find anything for us. Now, contrast that to every Web2 company that gets breached. If you go to like, have I been pawned, right? PWND, I think it is .com. You can put your email in and you can see as a user, you can see over the past 10 years, all of the websites where your password has been stolen. If you have a LinkedIn, if you have an Instagram, your password's been stolen. If you use the same password for all the websites you're logging into around the internet, that hacker now has access probably to everything that you can do. And there's listen to Darknet Diaries podcast or a lot of other things out there that can share with you all the horror stories that happen. So our first innovation, by giving users access to their own data, by putting that on the blockchain, it removes the amount of data that we hold, thereby allowing users to have more control over that data. And we believe that will make the site reduce the amount of spam and then also reduce the amount of phishing, because like I was saying, the friction we add brings more real people and more real interactions and less bots that are going to be phishing on Console. So those are two things of probably 10 that I could list, but I think that those maybe give you a sense of like immediately what you get when you come to Console is that we have a very low fingerprint of the data we have on you. And as long as you can keep track of your own keys and your own user password manager and keep those keys safe, you should enjoy a higher level of security.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of LastPass. I don't know if you ever use that, but it allows you to kind of like store all your passwords in one thing, and then you can authenticate with some like third party like device, right? So yeah, that's great. I do want to step back a little bit. One of the things I heard you talk about was that you guys are multi-chain, and currently you're on Stacks. How do you see the Stacks protocol at this time? I haven't really looked at it too much, but like I did think about maybe starting to like build on it a little bit. I'm kind of interested, being kind of heavy in Ethereum these days. I'm still a huge fan of Bitcoin in some ways because I think it's got its own kind of like value. But like, what do you think about the Stacks network? And do you think that's going to go anywhere, or do you think it's just kind of because I know that in general, most Bitcoiners don't like this concept of like decentralized applications. They're more just kind of about, internet money.
Yeah. Everybody loves Bitcoin, even people who are working in Ethereum and are like ETH maxis. In the
Yeah.
back of it, the way we got here was Bitcoin. At the same time, Bitcoin as like a cryptocurrency that we can do things with, there's not so much you can do with Bitcoin right now. You can send it, you can receive it, you can hold it. Unfortunately, most people just hold it. Therefore, the economy of Bitcoin doesn't really grow because most people aren't using it. Meanwhile, there's so many things you can do with Ethereum. You can, there's a vibrant network of NFTs. There's DAOs. There's just like, artists. There's all these like use cases. So Stacks. And I'll say the reason you can't do that is because Bitcoin by design had like one simple function and of what it could do. And that base layer like doesn't really change. The Bitcoin community doesn't really, they're kind of slow to change. I wrote a piece for Coindesk in 2022 about how Bitcoin is slow to change. If you want more, you could kind of read the comparison of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I'd say like the main takeaway is that actually like Bitcoin hasn't changed so much in 10 years. And that's actually its superpower, because if we zoom out, if something can stay the same for decades, then we can rely on it and we can build on top of it, and we can really trust it. And that's, to me, Bitcoin, right? It's a foundation. I think it's beautiful that you can't do that much with it, because let's contrast that with Ethereum, which I love Ethereum. It's just a different gamble on the future, I would say, because with Ethereum, things change very often, right? Even just in the past year, the entire base of how consensus works, moving to the merge, moving to proof of stake, right? Completely changes how everything works. That's a huge gamble, right? So far, it seems like luckily things are going pretty well. But when you make such a huge change to infrastructure, you know how code works, right? Like one little thing could just ripple and just kind of take down the whole thing. And so over time, again, zooming out like decades now, like looking back as if Bitcoin, 100 years from now, if Bitcoin hasn't changed in a year, it becomes really, becomes this thing we can build on. So the thesis of Stacks is, let's keep Bitcoin the way it is, and let's build a layer on top of it so that the programming layer is separate. So that if that layer ever gets, let's say, corrupted or taken down or something, that the Bitcoin never changes. We could always look at the settlement layer, is what it's called, the settlement for truth. The truth is always there. Again, contrast that to Ethereum, where in Ethereum, the programming layer and the settlement layer are both within Ethereum. So programming layer, which is more vulnerable to attacks, gets taken down or has problems, it can potentially kind of take down everything, and then you don't have that truth. So that's a bit technical, sorry. But
no, that's good.
So what do I think about the Stacks community? I guess full disclosure, I've been a member of I've been a proud supporter of the Stacks community for many years, alongside my support for Ethereum. And I would say that, I think the Stacks community are one of the friendliest, most welcoming communities. I think in part because they're smaller. I think people know each other, and you can get a sense of, if you build something, you get a lot of support, you get a lot of testers. Whereas if you build the same thing in Ethereum now, there's a lot of noise. It's hard to kind of get your bearings. So the community is really welcoming, really friendly. They've been so amazing for Console with their beta support. I think if you do have a project that you want to launch and get that kind of like early community love, I think that culturally is a great place to go. And then I think the future of the project, I guess like if I had to distill it, I think we'll come to, I think next year there'll be a big bet that the community's making. And not too many people know about this, but they're releasing what's called SBTC. And it's a little technical for me to try to explain, but in short, SBTC, it's basically a kind of synthetic BTC, like a wrap BTC, but it's going to be on par with Lightning, with how the peg in, peg out of Bitcoin goes, so that it's not a side chain, right? It will be much more integrated with Bitcoin. So you really will get that security of Bitcoin. It was just announced a week ago, the white paper, and I've known about it for a few months now because I kind of follow the inside baseball of stacks. But yeah, it's getting a lot of love from the Bitcoin community, which I think is important. And I think if they're able to pull this off and have basically like a programmable Lightning network that you can do smart contracts with, like the security of something like Lightning or Polygon, I think that would be a huge unlock. So I think that's the big bet. If that works out, I think there could be a lot of activity on Bitcoin over the next decade. If that doesn't work out, then I think, I don't know what else would be exciting beyond that. So I think that's the most exciting thing happening.
Yeah. Thanks for that awesome answer. That's really great. And anyone listening, I'll put all the links into the notes there for you guys so that you could check these out. Check out his article and kind of learn about the Stacks network as well if you're interested. No, that's really good. And so I'm kind of curious, one more thing just about Console, like what is kind of like your long-term vision for the project? Where do you see it going? How do you see engaging with the community and helping it grow? How can people get involved with the project?
Yeah, anyone listening, if you are part of a community or you're a community leader, we would love to chat with you. Just, you can come to Console.xyz. That's console spelled like C with a C, as you would expect, Console.xyz. And yeah, we have an application for anyone looking to start a community. We have an application now because we're in beta and we have just a really close relationship with the handful of communities building right now on Console. We want to understand your use cases better. We want to help evolve community and chat alongside you. We have an amazing team of eight developers and a security team and designers, and like we are all here really working for the communities. So yeah, anyone that wants to potentially be part of this opening kind of cohort of beta communities, you can apply. And then beyond that, we're slowly allowing new people off the waiting list to come test out Console. And so I'd say you could look out for that as well over the next year. Sign up for our waiting list, and join the community. We'd love to hear from you. The way I describe it is we're looking to co-create this future with our community. And so anyone that has strong opinions on what they would like to see, we're looking for our biggest advocates and our biggest critics to come tell us. And that's what we've been doing. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. At edTech, we do something called a technical advisory council where we bring in kind of all of our customers and say, hey, like, what do you really need? Right. So I think like going into the community and like figuring out what they actually want is really noble and a really good way to kind of build the product. Right. So that's super cool. Cool. So like just, last couple of things I just want to ask you is like, well, first of all, like, what are your predictions for the crypto market? I would say that we're in a bear market right now. I don't think that's up for debate. But like, where do you see the market going in the coming months to a year? And yeah, what are your thoughts about the current sentiment of the market?
I mean, clearly, cryptocurrency is down from where it was last year, financially, money-wise. I think the most interesting crypto of 2023 will be cryptography, and that will be owning your own identity. It's something we talked about a bit in this podcast. This next few years, we're going to see a real big rise of websites and apps that start integrating sign in with Ethereum, which is a great advance. You can check that out. SIWE, sign in with Ethereum, ENS integrations, Lens, Farcaster, and what we're doing, at Console is we're a platform that is allowing these integrations so that people with those can bring their social network, bring their identity, and start using our app. I like to think that we're among a small cohort right now, leading the way on this kind of integration, and that's we're trying to set an example. I think by next year and a year from now, I think we're going to see it's just going to become a normal thing, and just everybody will just have their social graph outside of the big incumbents, such that I think that in a few years, I think we'll see Instagram will have sign in with Ethereum. I think give it a few years, but I think that's where we're headed, and I think it's gonna be a major shift, because once people have access to their own data and their own identity, we can create an entire new way of funding the web, way of funding business on the web, way of respecting privacy and security. New businesses will support that to make it easier. It's not super easy today. It's getting easier, but it's not super easy. And so I'd watch cryptography as crypto and identity in 2023.
Yeah, that's such a good answer, because it doesn't really matter really too much about the market sentiment if you're a builder or if you're an innovator or if you're just trying to do something cool. Like, I think we're all just trying to like figure out like how Web3 is going to like move the world forward. So yeah, that's really great. Cool. So like I'm kind of curious, especially like coming from even myself, I currently am working for NGINX. I do a lot in the crypto community, but like, what would you recommend to someone who either wants to work in crypto or just get more knowledge about the crypto space and the Web3 space? Is there anywhere you would point them to or recommend?
Ooh, that's a hard one, because there's so much stuff on the internet to follow.
I know. I think that's part of the problem, right? There's just too many things,
I like Decrypt as far as like news, as far as I feel like they break it down in a pretty readable way. I think it's hard to cut through the noise, I'll offer myself out there. So I guess kind of shameless plug, but I'm working on a book.
Go for it. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, to combat it's called The Path to Decentralization, and it's about how we can understand Web3 by understanding the history of the internet, because a lot of these issues we're talking about aren't brand new. And I think if you can see the stories and understand the problems and the challenges, then you can understand the solutions better. That should hopefully be coming out in 2023. So stay tuned.
Awesome.
I'll put myself out there as a resource. If you're listening, I'm at Castig, Castig on Twitter. Also at Castig on Farcaster, in case I get banned on Twitter. Who the hell knows? I should start saying my Farcaster now. And yeah, reach out with any questions. I'm very happy to make a personalized video for you or answer any questions. And it's also helpful because as I write the book, it's good to know what people are asking about. So yeah, it's half written. I'm working with an agent right now and a team to get it hopefully alive in 2023. And so yeah, stay tuned. But yeah, happy to help.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening to this after the book's launched, I'll make sure it's in the notes. We'll put it in the notes as well, so that you can check out that book. And I personally want to read the book, so we need to make sure you send me that link. Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I guess that kind of answers my next question, is what you're excited about in 2023. If you're really going to release a book, that's a pretty big accomplishment. But is there anything else you're excited about 2023?
Ooh. I think I'm most excited about more communities coming to Console. I mean, that's just my main focus right now. So yeah, I mean, if we can help communities grow and manage their community better, and I'm excited for helping. So yeah, please come and reach out. I'd love to chat with everybody who's listening. And yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So one more question. What do you do outside for fun, like outside of work? Like, what are some of your hobbies, or what's some of the stuff that you like to do for fun?
I play music a lot still. So I'm learning my jazz scales right now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I also like to do CrossFit. I don't know. There's something about just showing up and having like a very, very specific agenda of things to do with people that like activates a part of my brain that makes it more fun than going to the gym by myself. So yeah.
Those CrossFit are like super intense. Like, I see those guys are just like running around doing this like crazy stuff with ropes and like jumping up and down. It tires me out just watching them. So I can respect that you do that. That's a hard one. Okay, great. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure, like learning all about you and Console. and really all the work that you've been doing in the space. And so I think you mentioned already, if people want to learn more, you can go to Castig on Twitter. You can also go to Console.xyz. If you're a community that wants to kind of build on a decentralized chat program that is secure, then I think that Console is a good option, and you should definitely apply for the beta. And so I'm excited for the launch of this, and I'm interested in the beta as well. So let's plan to check it out. Thank you so much, Chris. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for having me. Such a pleasure. This is a great conversation.